Well, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Virginia's for Realtors. I'm pleased to be joined today by Laura Schwartz, top producer in Northern Virginia. Laura, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me, Tanner.
You bet. You bet. I'm so excited to have you. It's been a while since I've chatted with the Northern Virginia agent. And when I was reading over your questionnaire, the amount of business you do for it just being you just blows my mind. So we're going to talk about all kind of like your systems and your processes and everything else like that. But I always like to kick it off with what we call the origin story. So every top producer comes from somewhere. So what was kind of like your background prior to getting into real estate?
So I started working for the government.
Okay.
Quickly found out that pace of life was not for me.
I see.
And then I transitioned to government contracting, and I was doing DOD estimates as a government contractor while I was getting my master's at Hopkins in economics.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I was not happy. That was not I was also like 24, so I had very little responsibility, and I was buying my first condo in Clarendon at the time, and the agent that was representing me was like, why don't you just come try, and he and I got along great. He was like, why don't you come try working for me for a little while?
Okay.
You figure out what's next. And I was like, okay, what the heck? I have nothing to lose. And so in April of 2008, I went into real estate full time and kind of hit the ground running and never looked back.
I mean, the time frame on that, though, to going from a stable government job into the lion's den of the real estate market in 2008, I mean, that's pretty crazy. But it's good, kind of like you said, that you didn't really have much to lose, right? So it wasn't like at that point, like I got kids, I got family, I got responsibility. Like
I had zero responsibility. So the risk, the risk was very calculated. There wasn't much that I had to lose at the time. So.
Yeah. So what were you, economics? I mean, so you must be, and especially on working on the government side, all the stuff that's going on must interest you to some extent.
To some extent.
Yeah, about what's about to happen. Right. But very cool. So when you get your license, you're like, now, was there a break for you? You're like, all right, I'm going to do this government job for 3 months and slowly work into it. Or you're just like, here's my 2 weeks and good luck.
So at the time, ironically, my older brother was a research manager or a facility manager at a research center in the Bahamas. So I did go visit him for about 10 days after I quit my job. And then I came back and I was like, okay, let's do this.
I mean, well, there's so many ways we could go on the research in Bahamas. I mean, tough gig. Is he still there, or is he moved on?
No, he's not. He met his ex-wife, and they came back to the States to start a life. So unfortunately, he's not still there, but
I got you.
It was a fun place to visit back then.
I was going to say, I hope you got a couple chances to go visit him before he left. So, having a local tour guide to the Bahamas, not a bad gig.
No, it wasn't.
And then he's like, great, now you can be my Washington, D.C. tour guide for the rest of your life. You're like, here we go. All right. So that's kind of what got you into the business. Now, was there anything, in your background that made you go, I'm going to be good at sales? Like, did you, were you working 9 jobs as a teenager? Like, how did you just decide that I'll do this?
So my parents immigrated in 1980 from Belarus, and they were religious refugees at the time. And they were entrepreneurs. It took them a couple of years. They opened a garage repair shop. My dad was a Honda specialist. So the two of them worked side by side for a really long time.
Wow.
And all of my cousins are entrepreneurs. My brother is also in property management. He is also an entrepreneur. So I grew up in that environment, and they were also real estate investors. So all of my family members own, some of my cousins do Airbnb. Some of my cousins just do long-term rentals. My husband and I have a couple of long-term rentals. So I've always been around real estate. I never thought I would go into it, but I did, I worked at Dick's Sporting Goods. I worked at CVS. I worked at a toy store. So I've always worked retail, and I've always sort of been in sales until I graduated from college and went into the corporate world. But I didn't know I was going to be good at it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I'm guessing your family members, when you're like, yeah, I'm going to go work for the government, they were probably behind your back. Like, she'll be there 6 months. I give it 6 months,
Yeah, I have no idea. I think for a while, my parents thought I was crazy to go into a commission income after having a stable job and thinking I was going to climb the corporate ladder at the time, but it all worked out the way it was supposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what a cool origin story. So when we come back, we're going to talk about your first year in business because it's different for everybody. And you went in. I mean, I'm not saying it's the worst time to get into real estate that there's ever been, but I remember that time and it was pretty bad. So we'll be right back with Laura. Break. Oh man. John Hopkins. Why do I always think medicine and you were economics? Like,
so they have different like schools.
Okay.
So I was in their what they call SAIS. I don't even remember what the acronym stands for at this point because I don't use it. But I will tell you, when I was young and 24 and trying to convince people to give me their greatest asset, that was like the thing I hung my hat on to be like, I know I'm not dumb. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It helped me build credibility when I was younger.
Oh, for sure. That's, getting in there, certainly the level of intelligence and grades and everything you had to have certainly a lot of drive. So that's awesome.
And the irony is the reason I went there is they didn't require a GMAT or GRE. I am not the world's best test taker. So I was like, oh, sweet. Let's go with
this. So let's see, like in this, we'll talk about the first year, but before I get to ask, so what sports do your kids playing?
They play all of them. So the older one, they were big baseball players. They are both about to quit that sport, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
Soccer, basketball, flag football. That's pretty much it without baseball.
Right. I was going to say, like, they're probably sneaking lacrosse on you or something to add.
I hope so. I really am trying to convince my older son to play lacrosse, but he's like not there yet.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well,
I was like, you can hit people because I won't let him play tackle football.
Oh, gotcha. Well, perfect. And you're right, though. The grind of football on the body, not great. Yeah. And I played basketball. I played basketball until I was like 45. So you can do that a long time.
Yeah.
But all right, so we'll talk about the first year for you in the business and kind of what you see for others who make it, in the business when they're in their first year, some of the agents that you've seen come on board lately, what they're kind of doing, and just kind of give an overview of those things for this segment.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. So, Laura, let's talk about kind of your first year in business. And for those that are listening that are newer to the business, the 2008 market, Northern Virginia, and anywhere in Virginia, but and across the country, but Northern Virginia, it was brutal. So, just kind of give me an overview of a recap of you walk in the door. What's going on for had it hit yet? Like, what do you got?
So when I got in, we were already into short sales. There were foreclosures and REOs, and there was a lot of that. And so it was a buyer's market. There were so many houses to choose from.
Yeah.
Which is vastly different than the way our market's been for like the last 10 years.
Right.
So it was, for me, it's sort of come full circle since I started of, a lot of inventory, no inventory, things sat for so long and you had to get creative on how to sell a listing. And now basically a house sells itself if it's presented well and priced well. So it's been a journey.
I remember when I would get a contract and if somebody didn't get seller concessions, I was like, what happened? Like, does this house have gold buried in it? Like, what is going on that they did not get all the closing costs covered?
An FHA down payment. Now I haven't seen an FHA contract in years.
In Northern Virginia, I would think not. Yeah. But yeah, I remember we had a Nehemiah program. It was basically shuffling around the money for the 3.5% down that we would use. That's the time frame that for me, VA really became more like you could start doing VA loans because prior to that in Northern Virginia, like nobody would take an offer. But like you said, there were multiple properties to look at. So how did, when you were working with a buyer, how did you level set expectations or were there no expectations? You're like, look, we'll write, you'll get it. It's all good.
Honestly, I feel like it was so long ago. I remember we would go look at houses until I felt like they found one they really liked. And then I went through my process with them, and I always equate house hunting to dating, kind of when you know. And so if you're still looking or if you're trying to talk yourself into a property, it's probably not the one. But back then when you had so many options, it was hard to pick one. Now it's like, here, you've got 3 options. Which one do you want? Back then it was very different.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you could look at 30 houses that were roughly the same.
Oh yeah.
And then, and that was not uncommon at all. And you could be in the same neighborhood to be like, okay, there's like 7 on this
Yep.
street. And,
Oh yeah.
we'll pick, you like the neighborhood. Cool. We'll pick one in here and kind of go from there. But yeah, just definitely an interesting time. So when when you get into the market and you start doing listings, doing sales, how are you getting business when you start off? Because I mean, it was a scary time of the real estate cycle.
Yeah. So one thing to note is my market back then was Arlington, and I don't have any family here. My entire family is in the Northeast. I didn't go, I got my master's here, but that's not the same as going to like Mason or Virginia Tech. And I didn't have a big database. So I had to start from scratch. And back in 2008, blogging was the rage. So I actually created a real estate blog that was arlingtonrealestatenews.com. I taught myself how to blog. I built a website, and I spent 3 days. I think I carved a spot in my couch, and I made a dedicated like blog post for every condo, every townhouse community in Arlington. I did research on amenities, how many units, and I just put the information out there. And that's actually how I got my first few clients, is people who found me online.
That's crazy. It's interesting that you mentioned that about blogging, because when I think about when you got in, and like agents now, it's kind of like TikTok, right?
Yeah.
Or like it's the way we do it has changed, but you were providing the information at the time. People would read it and the bubble, they read through it, and now it's like the video series, right? So what a smart way to get into it, and you were so like cutting edge at the time. When you think back, do you laugh? Like, yes, I was high speed, low drag with my blogging.
Yeah, but the funny part is, and this is, I think, where some people fail when they get in, is that was a free resource. I mean, I paid $10.
Yeah.
I paid $10 for the URL, maybe. Social media is free. It's just your time. And a lot of people in real estate get distracted by shiny objects. And a lot of those shiny objects cost a lot of money. Yep. And when you're starting out, you kind of there's an old expression called lead with revenue that when I was at Keller Williams, they taught us, and that kind of stuck with me. So if you're not making any money, you shouldn't be spending a ton of money. And that was the motto that I took to start.
Yeah. And that's people that are listening, new agents that are listening, lead with revenue. I love that, because you have more time than you have money. So correct. And as you get along in your career, you have more money than time.
Correct.
So in that beginning, you kind of have to do those things, like whether it's open houses or starting a blog or recording the TikTok videos at the condo, which leads me to a good question then. So if you are starting now, how are you shifting things from when, what would be different? What would be kind of similar to what you did when you started?
I would think social media, anything that's free, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, I guess, if we still have it next year. Right. That would be where I would go. And honestly, even a blog now, people that are searching online, if you have the information, they will find you.
Yeah. Whether it's like answering on Quora. I mean, basically the blog now is like Facebook groups, like, yeah. Oh, I'm looking in Arlington. You're like, here's my information that you can provide.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you're providing value, people will always need you.
Yeah, that's smart. Now, what about, so you dedicated time to set up your blog. And again, you weren't like, did you know the different condos you were talking about at the time?
Oh, yeah.
Or did you? Okay.
Yeah.
I meant more like, so did you research them a lot? Are you like going into them every day? Like, how did that go for you?
So I researched, or I called the management company to verify how many units they have, how many levels they have, the amenities they have, because I wanted the information to be accurate. Mm-hmm. And then I researched pet policies, because that's a big one. Some places didn't allow dogs. Some places didn't allow pets over 25 pounds. So that's information that as a realtor, I think people expect you to know.
Yeah, I just genius out of the gate. And I'm guessing it wasn't like you were running into like 1,000 bloggers competing against you, right? No. Or like, because established agents at the time, they're like, oh, I don't have time for that. I don't need to do that. It's, I don't understand it, or whatever they would say. And then here you are just like, all right, I don't know this world, but as far as blogging, but I'll figure it out. I got my web domain and just go for it.
Yeah, and back then we even had something called Active Rain, which
was I remember Active Rain,
right? Which was a free blogging platform that I started there.
I remember that. It's all, I would kind of like, for the people listening, I feel like that equated to, gosh, Reddit right now, maybe.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
for
it would be
sure.
kind of similar to that, I guess, is what I would say if I was like, what would be my comparison for active rain back then? But that's an old school term, active
Very,
rain.
very,
I'm
yes.
sure I still got active rain profile out there somewhere.
I'm sure I do too under my name.
Yeah, that's right. It's been a while since it's been posted on. Now, when you kind of look for, you talked about you're doing all the social media stuff that you can do for free. Every area across Virginia is different. What do you see new agents in your market? What are they doing to be successful? How are they getting business, to get going outside of like the social posts? Because that does take time.
That does take time. I think that open houses are tried and true ways to get in front of people.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook groups are another one, interacting with people where you live and shadowing other agents who are successful, asking them, can I learn from you?
And that's a great point. Now, to give people an idea of your production, it's basically 50 million over the last 12 months, which is just crushing it.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into how it's just you in a little bit here. But have you been asked by agents like, hey, how can I follow you around for a week? Like, is that common? Is it not common?
So it's not common. I think people have approached and asked, I do coffee with newer agents of like, hey, can you give me some ideas of what to do? And it's actually something that I really love. Yeah. And I've done it with a couple of people outside of the industry too, of like, one of my clients is a physical therapist. She comes to you and she's trying to grow her business where we live. And so she and I had coffee and I was like, what about this? What about this? And right. So it's fun for me, partly because I'm not the one that has to go do the work anymore. Right. But it's fun for me to be like, hey, what about this idea? Like, do you want to do this? And I think thinking outside of the box is a different way to get your name out there because, there are tried and true ways to grow your business. And there is a slow burn. And I think a lot of people want immediate gratification. And sometimes it takes a while. It's taken me a really long time to get to this production level. I wasn't always at this level.
Well, I love the idea, though, of, I've thought about that a lot, like talking to other sales professionals in other sales industry, because they, like when you present kind of the problem for a physical therapist, you're like, I tried this idea. What about that? Here's what we do. And they can probably come back with some similar ideas that like we don't know, right? Because we're not in their world on how they're getting business and getting traction. So I think the idea of like sitting down with other sales professionals is really good. And then the other thing you can kind of do from it, if you're a new agent, you can form your own BNI group, right? You can, which if I'm starting over, that's something I'm kind of thinking of is like, I want to make sure that I have these 10 sales professionals that are not all loan officers. Like, let's chat and figure out how you're getting business and see how I can incorporate that. So it's smart. Now, when you're looking at these, what do you think one of the things that separates people from making it right now and that those that don't? Because, during the last 2 years, it's not nearly as hard as the world that you entered and that I was in, but it's still pretty tough. So what would you say are some of the separators from people that are making it?
Problem solvers. Real estate is stressful and it's emotional, and you have to be the one that keeps the emotion out of it for your clients, partly because you don't want to ruin their experience and their excitement by sharing all of the background noise that's happening between you and the agent and the seller, buyer, and if you can't be the barrier, I try to make this process as easy as possible for clients. And part of that is just shielding them from the stress and the chaos that's happening behind them and coming to them with solutions. And real estate is not an immediate success out of the gate. Yeah. And I think if you think it's going to be all glitz and glam, you're in for a very strong surprise. And not everybody wants to work nights and weekends. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about this industry is the whole like real estate is flexible. No, it's not. We have to be the ones that are flexible because you have to work around their schedule.
Yeah. I think HGTV does a horrible job of illustrating that point. They need like the 9:45 like video of you with a laptop on your lap and like your phone on you and like the kid's sick as you're like trying to deal with a contract addendum and get on all sides of it. So that's a great point. Now I love what you kind of mentioned there, though, that, problem solvers, because I feel you have to have the right temperament in this business. I ran across I was doing a deal recently where the agent became too personal, not for the agent that I was working with, but the listing agent. And, to me, it's top producers. I don't ever feel that top producers bring that into it, right? It's like you represent the client, but it's like not personal that they want 9 items on a home inspection or whatever. So,
Right.
and it's such a good point, and being a problem solver. So, would you have some kind of final thoughts on kind of the things, that helped you through your first year that you kind of glammed onto that, you use today or things like that?
Yeah, I would say consistency. If you find something that feels authentic to you and feels comfortable, like I don't door knock. I am never going to door knock. It's not something that I enjoy. It's not something that I want to try, and I would never do it. Find something that feels like something you could do forever and do it consistently and do it well.
I love that. That's such a good point. Finding the one thing. Now, I do have a question for you that I've kind of been kicking around a little bit. So let me ask you this then. So, like, kind of in your business now or when you started, what's an activity that you do that brings you the most bang for your buck, but it's also the hardest for you personally?
That's a good one. Not to sound cheesy, but like none of it's hard because I enjoy doing all of it. And if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So like client events are exhausting. They are so tiring, but I love every minute of it.
Very nice. Okay, because there's so much planning that gets involved. You want to make sure everybody's having a good time. You're on, right? It's not like you go say hi to me and then you go say hi to that family over there, and you have to bring that same energy when you do it.
But it's also making sure that you get to talk to everyone. I had one client event where 2 sisters came and I didn't get to talk to them as long as I would have liked to. And I always worry, did they feel neglected because I didn't talk to them as long as I talked to someone else? And that part like bounces around in my brain. But I love seeing people who bought with me 10 years ago, who bought their forever house and aren't going to move again. So I get to see like, oh my gosh, you had a baby. Oh my gosh, you had 3 babies.
Right.
That part for me is really fun, but it's tiring.
Yeah. I love that though, but where it's like, you know what, it kind of goes back to the shiny object thing, right? It's like, I don't need to be the best at 50 things. I need to be the best at like 3 or 4 in this business. And I was thinking when you said that about Tiger Woods made a comment where basically somebody asked him like, what was his favorite club to hit? And Tiger's like, all of them. Like I can hit, he's Tiger Woods, obviously, but his point was basically like, I have these, I don't get handed a shovel and be told to hit like a 150-yard shot. It's like, I have these clubs, I've mastered them, and this is what I do really well.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So it really, well, that's what it kind of sounded like to me is what you're saying. It's like, look, I can do 5 things better than 99% of the agents you're going to run into, but I don't try to step out into the door knocking realm and see if I can master that. And there's some agents that probably are great at that. And maybe there's something inside them that makes them comfortable with that. But most people will never do it,
No.
So
not in my business plan.
No, it's not added for 2025.
No.
Well, I think those were all great tips for first year agents. Do you have anything you want to end on for this segment?
Don't be distracted by all the things that you think are going to bring you fast success. A lot of it is not as good as it looks.
Yeah. Before we go on this one, like what was kind of your time frame to start, like get your first deal, get your first couple deals, how did that go for you?
So I started full time in April and I closed my first deal, I think in October. So it took me 6 months to actually close my first deal.
Yeah. And that's such a good point for people listening, because you were laying the groundwork for where we're going to talk about, in your career here in a moment. But it takes time. Like very rarely do people just suddenly get, 8 deals right out of the gate. Right. And a top producer such as yourself, like the people that are listening, you're a new agent, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm I'm not getting the traction that I'm looking for. I haven't closed anything yet. Even the best, it takes time. So great point. All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about kind of where you're at in your business right now. And it's really good timing because we're talking about kind of, the 2025 season as we're approaching. So I'm sure you've been doing your business planning, and we'll be right back with Laura.
Sounds great.
Oh man, some great points in there. I have a loan officer that it's about 2 months now, and it was like really started out of the gate with that strong enthusiasm, and it's like it's starting to wean down. So I may have to let her know, like, you have to listen to Laura's podcast because top producers, it takes time. It took me 3 months to close my first deal, and that was only because somebody walked in the door. So so this segment, we'll kind of talk about, and I'd be really interested to hear, since it sounds like you kind of have your systems dialed in, of what your plans are for 2025, maybe over what 2024 or whatever, and just kind of everything that you do to produce the volume you do and how you get your clients. So,
all right, let's do it.
All right, cool. How are you good on time? I would figure it'd be out by 10. Does that work?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. So, Laura, let's talk about kind of business where you're at now. So we're, kind of bring us up from the 2008 blog world to kind of what you're doing now and kind of everything in between.
Sure. So it's been 17 years, which is crazy to think about. So this year I'll end with 45 units, about 55 million in volume. So this is my best year ever. I know a lot of people in 2024 had a down year. I'm very grateful for last year. I am very, very heavy referral based, and it's about 80-20 database, and then 20% of people who find me online.
And that the 80-20 of the database. So you're really touching base when, let's talk about how do you keep those people sticky, right? Like, what are you doing on a regular? You talked about earlier kind of your past client events, but that's, I don't know if you do them every 6 months, if you do them once a year, but it's going to be a little bit more than that. So how are you staying with them?
So I try to do 4 a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I try to vary based on, demographics a little bit. I try to do a family friendly event. I'll do an anyone event, and try maybe to do an adult one. I'm going to try and mix it up next year and probably integrate a few new things because I've done a lot of the same ones every year, which people love. This year, I always did a pumpkin patch. This year I transitioned into family photos instead, and that was a huge hit.
Nice.
So I'm going to try and do a couple of new things next year. And I also talk to my database regularly. So first of all, social media is another free way. It's also a great way. Go friend all your people. I love it. Like I said, I get to keep up with their lives. I talk to a lot of them almost daily based on Facebook or Instagram. So that's fun for me. I also, talk to them on their anniversaries, on their birthdays. So random times throughout the year, they're hearing from me. I've actually never been consistent with an email newsletter. So that's something that's on my to-do list for next year.
Okay.
I'd like to be more consistent with that. So there's a lot of things that are conventional wisdom that I just haven't done because as a one-woman show, I don't have the bandwidth for it. So I'm going to try and be more consistent with some of those next year. So hopefully that will help me even more.
Now, when you are talking about, do you block out time in your week that or day? Like, all right, I'm going to spend an hour responding to Tanner's anniversary or like, how do you go about doing that?
Usually Monday mornings are my touch base with people, handwritten notes, that stuff is Monday morning. It's a great time of the week where there's not a ton going on. You're either following up from showings over the weekend or reviewing offers from listings. But Monday morning generally for me is the most productive and creative time of what I'm going to do with my week.
Nice. Okay. Well, let's talk about the schedule a little bit more then. So would you say, let me start with this. Is Monday your best day as far as I get the most done in a week on Monday, or is there a better day that you go with, or?
It's usually Monday.
Okay. So you crush it out.
For administrative stuff, it's Monday.
Yeah, so you kind of crush it out of the gate on getting things done on Monday, and then let's see when you're taking that information and you're touching base with your past clients. Do you have a good CRM that you're using to make sure all right, I talked to Tanner a month ago, I texted him 3 weeks ago. How are you doing that?
So, truth be told, I used Excel spreadsheets until about 6 months ago when I decided to be a grown up and get a real CRM. So now I'm using Follow Up Boss, which, I'm still learning, and I don't know that I'm 100% on it yet, but so far I like it. If to paint reality, I realized I have this couple and I touch base on their birthday. I had her birthday, which was actually his birthday, but I never had him in there because they have a shared email address. So I emailed them, and I've sold them 2 houses. I have known them for 10 years. And I sent them a message. It was like, you never told me that I only had one of your birthdays mixed up. And they were like, don't even worry about it. And I was like, I owe you like a $10 lottery scratcher for not giving me shout outs for the past 10 years. So we're all human, but having a system definitely helps manage things.
Now, are you, here's a question for you. So if you're working with somebody like pre-close, after close, do you have almost like a sheet where it's like, hey, what's your anniversary? What's your birthday? Like, how do you do that? How do you get that?
So let me clarify. Their wedding anniversaries between them. That is not my thing. I'm talking about the anniversary of them buying their house, which is obviously
gotcha. Okay.
Well, I have that. But their birthdays, I actually collect from the title company.
Ah, nice. Okay. So it's smart. And, for the people listening, you can get that from your loan officer too. So it's like, hey, what is their birth date? And one more reason to use a local Virginia person versus Rocket or whoever else. So that's really smart though, of really kind of the Monday, I'm crushing it, stay in front of my past clients. Now you talked about the 20% angle. So 80% is coming from past client database, referrals from the past clients looking to move. Now let's talk about the 20%.
Yep. So people find me online. A lot of them cite my Google reviews. I work really hard on collecting reviews. It's a really important piece for anyone. The minute you have someone who bought, sold, or rented, ask them for a review, put it on Google.
Yeah.
So I'm up to 85-star reviews on Google.
Nice.
When I started, all of the reviews were being collected on Zillow. So unfortunately, like 200 of them are on Zillow. But that's a really important piece to build credibility.
Yeah, that's such a great point, and you're so right about Zillow, because that was such a push for a while. And then once they started doing what Zillow does, then you're right. I rolled over to Google too. Do you have any tips for getting people to make sure that they leave the review? Because we've all had the oh, it's a great experience. You send them the link or whatever. And then it's like, eh.
So I prep them at closing, like, hey, do you mind if I send you this link? And then I send it. And then, people are so busy. If when they're moving, try to avoid that day because it's an email that's going to get forgotten. So if there's a rent back, do it right after you close when they're not really doing anything, or wait a week until they close and then do it. And if they still forgot, mail them a $5 Starbucks gift card because guilt helps.
That's right. I love that. I do I do a drawing every 6 months for anyone that's left me a review. Yeah. And I recommend that highly for people listening, because, you'll have a lot of people that, like you said, they're busy, but then it's like you put a little skin in the game for them. They're like, oh, that's right. Let me go ahead and fill that out real quick. And
it's not that they don't want to do it. It's that people's lives are busy.
Yeah.
And it's just one of the things that if it doesn't make it on their to-do list, they just don't do it. So you just have to be consistent with follow-up and ask.
And how have you, I haven't been able to parlay the reviews help, right? Like somebody says, hey, you should use Tanner. That's the first thing they're going to do. They look and see your reviews. Yep. Have you kind of figured out the secret sauce to help have those reviews kind of help you get more business? Like if, you search top agents in your area, you're obviously going to come up in your reviews, but anything past that you've been able to kind of
reply to the reviews. So,
okay.
I've noticed that people don't always get into the details. So I had one client, we found them something off market. It was like a one in a lifetime deal. And they didn't mention any of that in the review. So, right. He was like, she was great. We'll give her 5 stars, blah, blah. So I went in and I replied with some of those details so that people can see it's not just like conventional. There are things that I do that are out of the box to try and get people into something. Yeah. So if you can help with that, that will also help you.
That's smart. And kind of adding the different, I love the idea of adding the information, because especially if somebody's very analytical and they see that, here's your paragraph and a half of like, oh, it's a pleasure helping you find this once in a lifetime opportunity. Yeah. They're going to go, oh, okay. It's not just great job over and over. So that's smart.
Everybody, they all push storytelling. So tell the story. Don't reveal any personal information that's confidential, but how you found the house is usually not confidential. So I think that's a great way to, tout your abilities.
Yeah, I think that's smart. Now I want to go back to your past client events. So
Yep.
you're doing 4 a year, and you talked about kind of like I have my adults one, I have my family, etc. What has been your favorite past client event that you've done, and kind of why?
Up until this year, I would have said the pumpkin patch, because I used to have 200 people come. You see them every year. I did it for like 6 years, and you see them from like when they're 3-year-olds and now they're 10-year-olds, and everyone's like, thanks for letting them still be kids and creating this opportunity. My kids come, they run around with all these people because they've seen them every year. So that was really fun for me. And then this year we transitioned to family photos, like I said. But if I had to do a favorite one, last year I did March Madness.
Oh, okay.
And so in Vienna, our community center is right next to the WOND Trail, which is next to a restaurant called Bear Branch, which has a bar with a bunch of TVs for sports. So we have a guy here who runs something called Nothing But Net, and he does sports camps. So I had him set up at the community center for people to drop their kids off for 2 hours, for him to run them around while they came to Bear Branch and had drinks and appetizers with me. And we watched basketball in addition to the March Madness bracket that I set up. And that was a huge hit. That was super fun.
How did you even go about like putting this together? Because that is so far outside the box of like, the pumpkin patch idea. I've heard that one before, but that one, wow.
So, it was just like Google form, register for the event. Do you need childcare? You're going to have to drop them off and then walk over to Bear Branch.
Nice. Okay. And what was kind of the feedback that you got from it?
People loved it. I did it on a Sunday afternoon, when all the travel sports are over, because if you do it on a Saturday, everybody's too busy with their own kids and their own lives. But usually Sunday afternoon's a good time to get people out.
Yeah.
And, remember with client events, it's also about the invitation too. Like even if they can't go, at least they feel appreciated that they got invited.
Yeah. It's basically a touch point. Because now are you, when you're sending it out, so you've sent me the invitation, then are you giving me a phone call too? How does that go? If you hadn't heard from me, I mean, do I get a phone call? What happens?
I'm not the best with that. So I'll send a social media post. I'll send an email. After that, I probably should call. I mean, we could all be better. It's just not something that I do. I will send a couple of text messages if I know people are around just to see, hey, did you see my email?
Yeah. Smart. Now, when you're, can you give people, because I think cost is always like a factor in this. Can you give us a ballpark of like how many people and, ballpark what you spent on an event like this?
I don't remember how many kids were dropped off, but I think adults, I had somewhere between 40 and 50.
Wow. Okay.
And then the restaurant had a minimum, so we had to meet that plus paying the childcare. I mean, it was under $3,000.
Yeah. And when did you see some almost immediate results from this effort? Like, were there a couple of people like, hey, I'm going to have my friend give you a call, or like, how did that go?
So almost immediately after most client events, I usually get 1 or 2 referrals right away. It's a great, and it's why I do it, but it's also not why I do it. It's being able to see these people year after year and say thank you, because a lot of them refer business to me year after year is really important to me. But it is fun to see how you just reminding them again, and it's the law of reciprocity, right? They want to do something back for you. So it's a great thing. And again, lead with revenue. There are much cheaper ones if you don't have the money to throw something like that together.
Would you, now you mentioned how your kids are very active in sports all around. Have you found that to almost be how are you leveraging that into like a good source of business for you as well?
So I sponsor all of their teams.
Very nice. Yes.
Yep. And so my name is on the back of most of their baseball jerseys. And, just talking to people, and I'm not an in-your-face kind of girl. Like, I'm not like, hey, I'm a realtor to everyone.
Right.
It's fun for me because my husband is the coach for like all of their teams. So some of these families we've known for years. And it's fun for me because a couple of them have come up to me and be like, we saw you in the Washingtonian. I didn't realize that you were a realtor. So that's always fun for me when people are like actually recognize me out in the world as not a mom, but like a professional. So that's also fun for me. So I could be better about that as well. But that for sponsoring their teams is something that I enjoy.
I think that's really that's smart though. I mean, and you're right. Like I'm not sure how many times you can remind people that you see on a regular, like I'm a real estate agent, and
Yeah.
and that's almost where if you can really establish that in the beginning, then the other parents kind of like point that out when it's, oh, we're thinking about, oh, you need to reach out to Laura, because I didn't know she was a realtor, and you probably had probably benefited from that on different times when it's come up. So I think that's just great.
One of my favorite things is there's a woman in town who just got her real estate license, and she calls me, and she doesn't have kids my age in the baseball world, but she's like, all of my baseball mom friends said I had to call you because I'm getting my real estate license.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So staying in front of past clients, we're doing the past client events. We're seeing people on a regular basis come from our sphere of influence where on the baseball side. One of the things, here's a good question for you. So if you for your business planning purposes, can you give me some of your top spends that you did and how they've benefited you, why you're doing them, stuff like that?
Yeah. So in addition to client events, I also send birthday notes with a lottery scratch off.
Okay.
To each of the adults. I don't touch the kids. The kids are their own thing. I'm not messing with that. So both parents, single people, whatever, I send them a happy birthday note with a lottery scratch off that always generates a thank you or a text or a phone call and a conversation. So I love that. Notes are free. It just costs you a stamp. So notes on their anniversaries is something else I love doing. Those are kind of my 3 pillars. Mm-hmm. Those are my big ones.
So your spend, you got our past client events, like, okay, my marketing budget, past client event, 10,000, 12,000 a year, whatever your number is.
Yeah.
Then you got, all right, I'm sending out so many notes regularly with my $5 scratchers. As a ballpark, would you say you have 15 of those going out a week right now, or kind of what's your, what do you think?
It's funny. It depends on the birthdays. I have, it just depends. Some months I have a ton of birthdays and other months I don't. So, but I'm super consistent with it. I have done this every year since 2008. And if you have bought or sold with me and I have your real birthday, you are getting a lottery scratcher from me.
Now, here's a question for you. Have you ever gotten a text back like, Laura, holy cow, I just won, $500?
No, the highest one in all these years has been $50.
Oh, man, I know.
Someone's going to hit it big one of these days.
That's right. They'll be like, I just won 10 grand. And you'll just be like,
let's go house shopping.
That's right. Let's go find a new house. I love those ideas, but because it comes down to, again, one, you mentioned a great point that I think agents need to remember: consistency. 2025, be consistent. I in my Facebook group at the beginning of 2024, I kind of set a goal of like, how many videos am I going to create for my Facebook group for Virginia's for Realtors, and that was one of those things where it's like, maybe I'm not seeing traction on the first X number of videos, but you keep doing it, and you will see results. So I love the consistency piece that you're mentioning, and it's funny because if we'd had this conversation 50 years ago and people had mentioned notes, it's still the same, right? Like the handwritten note, they wouldn't have blogs or YouTube or TikTok, but they would be talking about notes and that way of just communicating with people and staying in front of them. It's super smart. Now, do you have any kind of like any other wisdom, like what was kind of like the big jump for you? Like when did you go like that next level when you're like, wow, I can't believe I crossed 15 million, and what was it that did it?
When you niche down. So when my husband and I had our first kid, we left Arlington, we moved to Vienna. I fought moving to Vienna, kicking and screaming for 2 years. I didn't want to move. I was so afraid it was going to kill my business.
Yeah.
I couldn't sell in Arlington because I didn't live in Arlington. And I was like, I was 2 years, I fought him on this move. Moving to Vienna has been the best thing for us and for my business. I really doubled down on being sort of the neighborhood expert. Mm-hmm. And there's an expression called the riches is in the niches. And it's 100% accurate. When we got super involved in the community, my business grew.
Yeah. I love that. And it's such a great point. I always think about that because the people that are like the jack of all trades type, I don't feel they're always as successful as, or a better way to put it, somebody that's the jack of all trades type is doing 200 million, right? They'll help anybody. You're like the seniors, estate sales, and the first time buyers and all that. But for the majority of those that make it to your level, it really comes to like, I've focused on something. And so you obviously knowing, Vienna better than almost everybody, that has been helpful for you, and then really being part of the community. So it seems like you really just kind of integrated yourself after you got over your feelings on the move. Yeah. Such a great point. All right. So anything else to kind of wrap up this segment? What do here's a good question for you. So let's talk about like your tech. What do you got right now that you're for your tech stack, as far as like, what are you using on a regular basis that maybe other agents across the state aren't?
Google Suite. I use Google Forms all the time. Canva is great.
Yeah.
And my iPhone.
Yeah. That's all you need.
A lot of the videos that I shoot for Instagram or like the funny reels, it's all shot on my phone.
Wow. Okay. Now, do you have a stand that you're using? Like, do you have a mic for it? You just roll with the phone and go?
Just roll with the phone and go.
Wow. Okay.
A lot of people get hyper fixated on making sure it's perfect. And I subscribe to done is better than perfect. So, if the audio isn't 100% synced, but it's good enough, I'm going to post it.
Yeah, I love that, because people get too wrapped up in like, it wasn't perfect. And then they didn't do the video. Yeah. And then they didn't do it yesterday and today and things like that.
And it's just like working out. Once you stop doing it, it's harder to get back into it.
Oh, you're not wrong. You are not wrong at all. Now, how do you, you did, or was it 50 transactions or 45 for 50 million this year? Like, how are you doing that much like on your own? Because you don't have it, you mentioned, or correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't have a TC. It's you.
That's me. Yep. I am super organized. I think that's one of my greatest strengths. And I have systems. So everything is written down. I have a checklist of what I do when a buyer goes under contract, when a seller goes under contract. And it just helps keep me focused, and it helps guide the process and make it easier to make sure I don't have an moment if I forgot to do something.
Yeah. Now, are you reviewing this daily? Do you have a day that it's like, maybe Monday is your day where you're following up on all these tasks? Tell me, how are you staying on top of this?
So there are so many ways to track things. Back when we had multiple offers and there were no contingencies, it was super easy. You pass them off to the lender, you pass it off to the title company, and you say, see you at closing. But now with contingencies coming back, you have to manage deadlines. So I put reminders in my Google Calendar. I know when it's coming. I know when things need to be done. Also, as a mom, my kid's schedule goes on my calendars first. So I schedule around all their stuff, because otherwise I would forget all of it. There's just too many pieces to manage.
Yeah, I'm sure with the busy lifestyle that your kids are leading, and the whole activity is, I'm sure that Google Calendar's got lots of different, lots
very
of
color
things. That's right. Well, awesome. I think that's some great information. So, Laura, when we come back, I would love to hear some great stories from 17 years in the business. So we'll be right back with Laura. Break. Perfect. Oh man, I'm still impressed by that. I'll be honest. I'm just like, holy cow, that's a lot.
Thanks.
Like if you did, 20, then it's like, okay, I can see that. But you have to have your systems in place to really knock it out. So yeah, very impressive. Okay. So in this segment, we talk about kind of, here's my 4 things: best piece of advice, personal motto, bold move, and best story. And those are our segments for this one.
Okay.
All right, let's do it. Well, all right. Well, welcome back, everyone. So Laura, now it's story time. 17 years of selling in the Northern Virginia market. I'm sure you got some good stories for us, but let's start off with kind of the best piece of advice that you've gotten. It could have been yesterday, could have been, all years ago. Best piece of advice in real estate you've gotten.
Take care of the client and they'll take care of you. Nice.
Easy. Yeah.
Take care of them.
I think that's, man, it's unfortunate when you do see people that don't look at it that way, or, they're trying to cheap out over whether it was like helping towards closing costs or something like that. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody kind of get cheap on something and then the client ends up renting. So we went from some thousand, you could have had some thousand, now you have no thousand. So yeah. I'm a big proponent of that as well. How about a personal motto for you? There's a book called The Go-Giver. Yeah. That I love.
and I wish I could remember the quote verbatim, but I think it is that what you put out into the world is so much more than you could expect to receive, financially. Yeah. So put out into the world good things, and good things will come back to you.
Yeah, and that's a great book. And people that haven't read The Go-Giver, they definitely should. It's an easy read, but it really reinforces in our businesses what we do of that idea of helping the client, putting more out into the universe than you're expecting to get back, and you kind of reap the rewards of it. So it's a great point. All right, so here's my next one. Bold move. And a bold move is basically something that you did to get a transaction, a long-term client, just something that if you hadn't made this move, you don't get them. So what do you got for me?
I donated a free listing to an auction for an organization that I support locally. It's called Bras. They provide menstrual supplies to schools.
Okay.
And they have a silent auction, and I donated a free listing without a cap on price. And the starting bid was $5,000. Wow. And I got a $1.2 million listing out of it in town.
Wow. Okay. I mean, and then, and then have you been able to kind of parlay? Did they buy something else too? Or, how did that go?
They did not buy a house, but I knew that it was okay. They ended up being friends of mine who I loved working with. And so it was a really fun experience for me. Yeah. And, I was so grateful to help them and thankful that they donated as much money as they did to the charity.
And supporting a great cause. Yeah. And that's awesome. I mean, good on you for kind of putting, using the resources we have for a good cause. So yeah. Love it. All right. So now we're going to go into the best story. So here's your premise. You're sitting on the beach. I love St. Croix, so we're going to go with St. Croix in 20 years. And, somebody comes up and they're like, oh, you're a top producing agent. Like, so you're like, yeah, oh, yes, I was. So your best story from your years in business today, it could be weird. It could be scary. It just could be, could be just anything. Like when you think of your best real estate story, what do you got?
There was we have a Facebook group where people can sell stuff, give stuff away, whatever. This woman kept posting stuff that she was giving away, curb alert with a picture of all the stuff on her curb. And you could see their name. So I looked her up. I knew where she lived. And so I sent her a Facebook message and was like, hey, just curious, you're giving all this stuff away. By chance, are you selling your house? She's like, actually, I am. Here's my agent. The agent turns out to be a friend of mine. So I call her. My clients get in. They write an offer. We get the house. And they are thrilled. And I mean, in no scenario do we necessarily get the deal they got if that had gone to market.
Yeah.
So it was so fun to be like, hey, random Facebook stranger, do you want to sell your house? And I brought the buyer. She had an agent. I wasn't trying to cut anybody out. It was just meant to be.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes that happens, but just right place, right time, transaction happens and you make all parties happy. So,
also,
good story.
Pay attention to the things around you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, it goes back to spending that time of, okay, I'm on Facebook, like be productive. Certainly you can go down many rabbit holes, yeah. But being productive is great. So Laura, I think you passed along some outstanding information for the folks today. Congratulations on all your success this year. I know 2025 is going to be even better for you. So thank you for taking the time to come on.
Thanks for having me, Tanner.
Oh man, that was awesome. Good job. Let me hit my end recording button so it'll upload for us here. All right, let's end recording.